Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of boards, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series. Take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. For this video, I'll be reviewing the sourcebook and adventure Dread Metrol Into the Mists, designed by Keith Baker, Andrew Bishkinskyi, and Imogen Gingell for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my content, consider using my affiliate links for online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/Rogue Watson. I don't know whether to be excited or worried that my first review of 2022 is also one of the most impressive products I have reviewed on the DM's Guild. So Dread Metrol is designed by Keith Baker, who is probably best known as obviously the father of Eberron, which is a very, very cool setting in Dungeons and Dragons. That's more kind of arcane punk, has maybe a higher level of technology, and it's just a really, really neat setting that should get more love and attention. And what this does is takes a part of Eberron, specifically a city that was in the Mournlands, which I'm not going to go over all of the Eberron history, but basically there was a kind of magical WMD that got set off in one of the countries during this big world war, and nobody's quite sure what happened, and the entire place is just kind of under a nasty fog with a bunch of monsters and stuff in there. And what this posits is that what if one of the cities, one of the main cities in that land was actually pulled into a demiplane, which is, so Ravenloft, which, again, to describe what Ravenloft means is, it's not all just vampires and werewolves. Ravenloft is just basically these demiplanes that exist as kind of pocket dimensions. They can be, cities, they can be just geographical locations, but they're all kind of ruled by a singular dark lord who is usually a tragic figure or some kind of villain with a backstory that kind of, the plane itself is a manifestation of themselves in a lot of ways, or their own history or something. And that's what Ravenloft is. If you get Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, you end up with like 20 different of those kind of demi-planes. So what Dread Metrol Into the Mist does is it is an effective Eberron Ravenloft crossover. It takes a part of Eberron and puts it into a Ravenloft demiplane, which is the city of Metrol. And it's cool as shit. So it is a 100-page product, about half of which is just sourcebook information, which those of you who have read through Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft will be more familiar with, because it's a lot of setting information. It's breakdown of locations, a breakdown of the history of the demiplane. There's a lot of information about the Dark Lord, Queen Dannel, and then also includes some adventure hook story ideas that you can use as a DM, as well as even some player I think it's the only one is there's one new artificer subclass that's also included. And then the other half is an adventure, which is probably maybe not quite as, it's not as big as Lost Mines of Phandelver, but it's closer to that than it would be any other of the smaller adventures I've looked at. So kind of a medium weight size. It's not a full, huge, 1 through 12 whatever campaign. It's a 1 through 4, although you level to 4 after the adventure, basically 1 through 3. But still, it's got different chapters and there's things going on. It's a really, really awesome adventure that I'm gonna go into in this review. But I am very, very impressed. I have not run anything in Eberron, nor have I run anything in Ravenloft. So this is all kind of, I've reviewed a lot of content in there, so I'm familiar with all of those things, but just reading through this makes me very excited to explore those options. So what is this demiplane? So if you have read Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, you may actually think that it's a little similar to one of the other ones. I don't remember the name of it, but I remember there was one domain in that book that specifically was a undead apocalypse demiplane. The whole thing was, and the survivors were very militaristic and authoritarian because of the necessity to have to always be at war because you've got this invading force of undead coming at you. I think it was every month or something, but it was a wider region. This is a similar concept, but instead it's kind of hyped up and it's a smaller, more focused region. It's just the city, which is Metrol, and Metrol is under attack by undead invaders every single night. every night this poor city is just besieged by a relentless, unstopping force of undead, and there is no, it's really more of an environmental hazard than anything that you can actually fight, because it's a magical demiplane. It's just always happening. There is no end to it, and it's been happening canonically, according to this book, for about 4 years. The citizens have been stuck in here. They've been dragged in this demiplane, and it's there's some weird kind of stuff the demiplane does, where like time doesn't pass normally, and despite it always being on the brink of failure and people dying left and right, there's always a certain amount of people around. So it gets kind of around things like, oh, why wouldn't there be anybody left in this city with all the deaths and stuff? Well, because that's just kind of how the weirdness of the demiplane works. It is ruled by Danel, the Queen of Sire, which is the region of the Mournlands. She resides in Metrol, as she rules with an iron fist, and it's quite hilariously literally a like steel. She's basically part Warforged, which is neat because Warforged play a big part into Eberron's history with the war that went on. And she it's almost like a Darth Vader thing going on, where she's becoming more mechanical, and she is very much one of those, we have to win at any cost. She does care about her people, but she cares about protecting them from the undead, and thus her things have gone very authoritarian and very, overly oppressive, and she's very paranoid about, agents working against her, because she thinks this undead invasion is actually sent by a neighboring country, and it's their soldiers that are attacking her. So it's a tragic figure. It's a good villain to have, because you can kind of see how she would be driven to these extremes, but also she definitely does do like horrible extreme things. And there's also this resistance faction that they also end up killing and hurting people, because it's just everything's so in a dire way, and there's content warnings and everything about that. But this is a grim, dark setting, like a lot of the Ravenloft demiplanes are. But this one especially, because it's Eberron, it goes hard into the science aspects. There's a lot of cool mad scientist stuff happening here. There's a lot of experiments, especially with melding flesh into steel and transforming people into basically like cyborgs, like half Warforged. And there are some rules about turning people into, what was it called? I think it was called Reforged, which was a new template you can use for NPCs. And I think there's even notes on how to make a player character as a Reforged as well, which they have basically just parts of their body. And that's also what the Artificer new subclass is they gain like this metal fist that ends up being a pretty powerful melee weapon that they can attack as a more melee version of the Artificer. But, it's hard for me to go over, like, in page by page with a lore source book. I'm just trying to give you all this information, but it's extremely well written. I mean, Keith Baker, edited by Laura Herzberner, like, those two have just done a phenomenal job with a lot of Eberron content, and it's so well written and well conveyed. It makes it a really good I mean, I actually sat and read through the damn. I was picturing me having to skim through a lot of this stuff, and I was just fascinated and became more interested in a lot of the lore and the locations of everything. The fact that like the eastern part of the city has been lost, and there's only this one like bridge that can cross this one area, and this whole there's these giant spires that like predate the city. Then one of them's come crashing down. It's just there's so much neat stuff going on in this city. There's a prison yard where they actually capture people, and there's another area where they experiment on them and do all those creepy mad scientist style experiments, which becomes a cool ending dungeon crawl for the adventure. It's very, very neat. I'm a huge fan. The Dark Lord alone gets like 4 pages and a stat block, which is something Van Richten's sucked at. We didn't get any of the cool stat blocks for our Dark Lords, whereas she actually has a CR 15 awesome stat block with a bunch of unique abilities and things, as befitting the fact that she's like half Warforged, which is really, really cool. I mean, there's all these faction notes about the Unbroken and what are they called, like the Queen's Shepherds, and then all the different Dragon Mark houses, like what are they doing, how they've turned very dark and desperate. Cause it's a really cool like urban grimdark setting. Here we go. The Reconstructed, that's what it is. The Reconstructed is the new template you can use. And then the Artificer here is the Master Maker. It's got that really cool metal fist where you can either have it, you can actually have it with a longer reach or just shoot it like a rocket fist almost at, I believe it's 3rd level. You can choose that specialty. Very, very cool. And then we've got, that's just the source book, by the way, which is great. There's really good information in here about, which I didn't want to gloss over this too much about adventure ideas you can use. Like all these background, especially for characters, for creating characters that actually begin in Dread Metrol. If you wanted to, because the adventure that's included is levels 1 through 3. And it does a cool thing where you can either drag characters in from Eberron into this demi-plane with a classic, something dark happens and the mists envelop you and you end up here. Or you can have them literally start here and give them that information. In fact, there's actually a separate player version with a lot of this information that's kind of edited without the adventure stuff ideas that you can give to your players in case they actually want to start their campaign already having lived through this experience for years and years, and maybe they're reconstructed and they've got all this dark past with them, and you could really run it as a really unique Ravenloft only setting, but just with a more advanced technology that Eberron offers. So a lot of really great ideas for that. And not only that, but the adventure includes 2 different starts, depending on, again, if you wanted to start in with a regular Eberron adventuring party and have them drawn into the mist, in which case you've got this really creepy stranger in a strange land like thing going on where it's like, what the fuck's going on? Or you can create possibly a darker campaign by having them just be natives of the domain of Metrol to begin with. So that's what's included in part 1 using path A and path B, which is very effective. And then both of them, they do converge for the part 2, which is where you begin in the kennels where people are being herded and captured and experimented on. There's a prison break essentially where you go with this very important NPC and you're trying to escape to the resistance faction. Now, this is a very cool adventure. It does the chase sequences and the urban stuff very well. There's definitely a sense of the whole city is out to get you. There's a couple of chase sequences. There's a classic scene where like somebody offers you refuge, but then you kind of learn that like, oh wait, they're about to sell you out, and they literally like do the classic call the authorities and they come banging in. I love that. Very effective trope. The caveat is it's very linear. Like things very much happen like A, B, C, D, which I get. That's part of adventure design, is you kind of have to do things some linearity, especially if it's a shorter adventure, which I think this kind of ends up being a little shorter. It's kind of hard to tell. There's one meaty dungeon crawl at the end. Otherwise, it's a lot of meeting with people and events and things. There is a cool thing where you have to bribe like a guard to get across the only bridge you can get across, and there's multiple things you can do to actually help him get across, which is in let's see, where's that about the bridge? Nope. Where are you? The cost. So you can either turn over one of the NPCs you've been escorting, which is pretty dark but effective. You can murder his partner and make it look like a bunch of bandits did it, or you can evict some people from an apartment that he's looking to get. And again, how you do that is also can be dark or however you want to try to do it. So they give you a few little options along the way. Normally, I would complain about if an adventure is too linear, but what this one does effectively is it reminds me of an immersive sim in video games, which is kind of an odd terminology, but that's usually applied to like first-person shooters with a lot of story and atmosphere, like think BioShock or Dishonored or Prey, which I really like those kind of games. And I think this gives me that feeling of like this city really feels alive. There's a lot of really great set dressing and characters that really feel like they live and breathe this very unique setting that's very dark. Everything around you that's is very oppressive, and you're being chased or you're working with resistance, but the resistance isn't 100% altruistic or good guys either. There's a person that you rescue towards the end. Once you get to the resistance, they want you to go rescue this guy, and you rescue him and you bring him somewhere else, and that guy bursts forth like a freaking alien chest burster because it was that they knew you were going to rescue this guy, and and he gives you this dying quest, and you kill little bugs that pop out. It's all very cool and very dark. So I think that part makes up for the fact that it is very linear, that it's one after the other. But because it's so effective at telling its story and immersing you in that world, I think it's worth having this be a mostly linear adventure with a few cool, options and things that players can do along the way. But just know that it is a pretty linear adventure, but I think it makes up for it. And frankly, I think you could use the final part as a drop-in dungeon in like Eberron if you wanted to make just a cool like dark laboratory kind of a dungeon area. And by the way, if you're noticing, full color grid battle maps for all of these locations, which some of them you wouldn't necessarily even need, but very nice to have, because I think town maps in certain settings can be very difficult to find and implement because towns can be very specific when it comes to their geography and their level of technology and things versus like a forest. So it's very, very nice to have those kind of maps included, and these are all included as separate image files, I believe. So that's very handy to have. And then all of the stat blocks, which I believe there's over 20 of them that are included, whether they're new unique stat blocks or just ones that we know already, are included in the end as well, which is very helpful. But as I mentioned, you could use this Arcane Laboratory, this Kennel's Lab, as its own drop-in dungeon as you discover that it's, a bunch of dark experiments going on. There's a lot of neat little moments and things. There's, somebody growing plants, and there's an assassin vine in there, and they give you like this jar of ooze you can use to escape out the back. And there's a creepy, like, you find out, a dark twist about they're making people be able to eat like the dead essentially, but the twist is that the dude, the creepy like proto Genesis one, whatever the first one they did it to, is actually just a nice dude, and he's normal, and he's just kind of chewing on dead people, and he's like, hey guys, that was actually a really great twist, because you picture something really dark, and there's like the first written on the door, and he's like, oh shit, what are we gonna do? There's this creepy ghoul thing in here, and it's just a dude, and he's like, hey, I could, I think they've solved our hunger problems. That's great. That's really great. And then the ending can include either a way for you to bring those Eberron adventures back to Eberron, or you can continue adventures in the demi-plane if you wanted to. But what a cool 1-2 combo with having this very effective source book to where you feel very prepared and informed as a DM to how to run an adventure in a Ravenloft setting that's got that Eberron technology in it, and B, that you've got this full adventure that you can run, and it's perfectly constructed. It looks very well balanced. It doesn't have the adventure level adjustments or things like that, but it just reading through it, it seems like I don't see any problems anywhere with that. There's really helpful like sidebars and tables, and the artwork, the presentation, all of it is really good. I just couldn't help but be extremely impressed with everything that we are given in Dread Metrol. Let's go over my pros and cons for Dread Metrol Into the Mists. Pros: 40 pages of lore, factions, and locations of the domain of Metrol. Those first 40 pages are literally just an amazing source book of information for a demi-plane. Any demi-plane is really nice to have. Pro: lengthy details and history on the Dark Lord Queen, including a stat block. Yay! But she's very cool. The fact that she's like half, metal and warforged and has all this different information on it. I mean, a lot of the Ravenloft demi-planes, they're all about their Dark Lords. And this one, she doesn't play as big of a role, and she's not a role at all in the adventure, but it's one of those things where if you do a good enough job of having it be, there's some cool messages you'll see in the adventure, like, the queen is watching or something, to where you really play it up. And it's one of those things that I think you can effectively create a campaign around and have, the players eventually cross paths with her, or use her as a certain, patron, and maybe later you decide that, oh, she's actually like, her methods are too evil or whatever. But there's a lot of really great stuff in there, and I love the fact that we actually got a stat block. Pro: suggestion, tips, and tables for crafting adventures and creating adventures in the domain of Metrol. Basically, there's a couple pages between starting at page 40 right here and going all the way to 45, where it really does a great job talking about how to make adventures that don't necessarily have anything to do with the adventure that's actually included here. It's just, hey, here's some story ideas. Here's some things that have been happening. Here's ways you can, apply different factions or different NPCs or plot lines. It's very well done. I almost wish it was like bullet pointed or organized a little bit more instead of just doing these long paragraph formats, just because there's a lot of really good information in here. I think it's easy to gloss through it because we just read, 40 pages of source book, and this is more, that's really good information, but this is like directly applicable to constructing an adventure. Pro: new artificer subclass, the Master Maker, which is very cool. Kind of hidden away at the very end between the source book and the adventure, but it's awesome. I love it, and it very much fits the fact that you would be somebody, especially if you were starting in Dread Metrol, that you were just kind of similar to the Queen, where you're half, construct. An adventure, the Morning After Adventure is an atmospheric urban adventure for demi-plane natives and newcomers alike. I think it's really effective at immersing yourself into that world and including all these awesome NPCs, this very grimdark setting with just undead coming everywhere. It just reminded me of playing like a Dishonored or something, where you just can't help but feel or Bioshock, where it's hitting you over the head in a good way about how unique and important and flavorful this setting is. And final pro: adventure includes over 20 stat blocks and several full color battle maps. It's got all of the things that I love to see when it comes to adventures. Cons, there is nothing. I thought about, again, a little complaint about the linearity of the adventure, but because the adventure is otherwise so well done, I don't think I'm going to include that as an official con at all. So I just super positives for me the whole way. Final verdict, Dread Metrol transforms a fallen city of Eberron into an intriguing Ravenloft demiplane. It's 1 part detailed sourcebook, 1 part gritty urban adventure, and 100% awesome. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel, and support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. Shouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Christopher, Thomas, Adam, Stan, Nathan, Alex, William, I'm Loud, Al, Furkan, and Kyle. And gold patrons RPG, Papercrafts, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Marcus, Dead Lizard, Lion, Sam, Olympus, Spuds, Drome, Scalenia, Blood Angel, Vronus, Baboon, Nathan, Fast Like a Tortoise, James, and Genocider. Thank you all very much for your support.